Thank you for the invitation. People are in the restricted area, just got off the plane. My answer to the question asked by the questioner about the survival rate of entering the penalty area is 100%. Many people say that this world is filled with forbidden zones, occupied by eerie and monsters, and even some say that the cemetery I am in is also a forbidden zone. I scoff at this. Based on the principle of practice leading to true knowledge, I have traveled back and forth multiple times to various restricted areas among the public, and have never encountered any abnormalities. Everything is normal, the penalty area and monsters do not exist, and there is no such thing as danger, so the survival rate of the penalty area is 100%. Just think about it, if I can still answer the question from the questioner now, it's already the best answer, isn't it? Sorry, all answers above are invalid. I can clearly tell everyone that the restricted area and monsters are real existence. However, for me, the survival rate of entering the penalty area is still 100%. The reason is not complicated. Because of myself, it's the most terrifying taboo in this world. Keywords of the novel. Tomb Guardians in Forbidden Areas with no pop-ups, complete collection download of Tomb Guardians in Forbidden Areas TXT, latest chapter reading of Tomb Guardians in Forbidden Areas. Chapter 1. Buyu Village. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Buyu Village. The sky is shrouded in dark clouds. Fine raindrops fell in clusters, falling on the pitch-black soil. The air was unusually dull, remaining silent alongside the still tombstone. A strange crow flew low in mid-air, its blood-colored eyes twirling strangely. It didn't know what it saw, but suddenly flapped its wings and took off, screaming and leaving the area. The sound was loud and piercing, as if afraid of something. This is a cemetery, surrounded by a barren area with no visible green plants. Unknown tombstones are neatly arranged and closely spaced, leaving only a small path for one person to pass through. After each tombstone, there is a square deep pit dug and a pair of pitch-black coffins placed. The wind was strong, causing the door of the small house at the end of the path to creak. The dust accumulated on the door handle was scattered, and only large pieces of yellow talismans remained stubbornly attached to the door. I don't know how long it has been. Creak. The door, which had not been opened for a long time, was pulled open by a pair of pale arms. The pale-skinned young man lazily walked out of the door, and the darkness behind him was particularly deep, making it difficult to see the scene inside. Buyu was dressed in a black sportswear. He stood quietly at the door for a long time, looking up at the dark sky with a relaxed smile on his face. The weather is really nice, he sighed. The sky is still gloomy, not like early morning, but more like dusk, which is not a good weather at all. Strangely, whether it was the howling wind or the continuous rain, it had already stopped at some point. After a simple wash, Buyu picked up a wooden stick from the house and patrolled around the cemetery to confirm if there were any abnormalities last night. As a tomb keeper, his main job is to be responsible for the safety of this cemetery, more specifically, to ensure the safety of these corpses in the cemetery. Of course, it's not because he's worried about being haunted, he's a staunch atheist. What needs to be guarded against is people. After all, there are everyone these days, and there are many who practice courage and seek excitement. Some even sneak into the cemetery to steal corpses, so we have to be cautious. Seeing everything was normal, Buyu walked into the room and only then noticed that the door was covered with a dense collection of yellow paper. He couldn't help but frown and say, "Who posted this small advertisement? The characters are written like ghost symbols. I remember not having it yesterday." Perhaps it was because he didn't sleep well last night that Buyu's thoughts were a bit confused. He didn't delve into it, but cleaned the room thoroughly. I don't know what's going on, but the food and water he just bought a while ago have inexplicably gone bad, unable to eat or drink, and even the toothpaste he just used for washing has a strange smell. It seems to have expired. This is not a small matter. Taking advantage of the early weather, he had to go nearby to make some purchases. A group of unscrupulous merchants who dare to sell such unscrupulous products without fear of retribution. Buyu muttered in fragments, closed the door, and walked out of the cemetery along the path, gradually disappearing into the morning mist. At the same time, on a desolate path, a team was slowly advancing on full alert. This team consists of about 7 or 8 people, including both men and women, mostly fully armed and with a cold expression, making it difficult to match the characters at first glance. At the end of the team was a strong and muscular man carrying a camera, constantly adjusting his figure and filming the crowd. In front of him, a long-haired girl holding a miniature microphone took a deep breath, squeezed out a sweet smile towards the camera, and spoke softly. "Hello everyone, I am Orange, a reporter from the restricted area. As you can see, now I and 6 explorers have entered the restricted area. This is an unexplored C-level restricted area, codenamed Buyu Village, and the intelligence inside is completely unknown. We will be the first group of explorers, allowing everyone to clearly see the situation inside the restricted area. Without further ado, the exploration is about to begin. For safety reasons, I will now turn off my microphone and try to stay quiet." The smile on Orange's face eased slightly, and she decisively turned off the microphone, her expression becoming alert. Keeping quiet is the most basic survival rule in the penalty area. Moreover, the restricted area this time is called Buyu Village. People with a bit of brain know they should shut up. The restricted areas first appeared over 200 years ago, with black stone tablets falling from the sky, engulfing large areas of land and forming eerie and unpredictable restricted areas. The human activity area remained less than 1/10. In the restricted area, there are numerous crises, including mutated flora and fauna, terrifying monsters, and even bizarre life beyond human cognition, posing a huge threat to human safety. Fortunately, these things cannot leave the forbidden zone, and many powerful individuals have emerged among humans, constantly exploring and cleaning the forbidden zone. Crisis and interests coexist in the restricted area. Setting aside the novelty in the restricted area, as long as someone can bring intelligence out of it alive, they can get a large windfall, which attracts many people to go there. As time passed, it gradually evolved into a profession that made a living by exploring forbidden areas, known as the explorer. They are either exceptionally intelligent or extremely powerful, constantly active in the penalty area for profit or pleasure. The Parliament not only did not prevent this, but also strongly supported the production of a program called Detective Forbidden Area, which immediately ignited ratings. No editing, no mosaic, injuries and bleeding are commonplace, and death is also commonplace. This is the cruelest reality show and a zero-distance revelation of life in the penalty area. Every time it airs, it causes a sensation, if the program is complete enough. The danger of the restricted area is not just talk. In fact, most detective programs have no end because few survivors can leave the restricted area alive. According to incomplete statistics, less than 1/3 of the exploration missions have survivors. It is worth mentioning that insurance companies have long stipulated that they refuse to provide insurance for explorers, and they are not responsible for deaths related to restricted areas. Orange withdrew her thoughts and forced herself to calm down, as the team moved forward along the path. Not long after walking, the road ahead suddenly opened up, and everyone looked at each other and walked in along the road. The muscular photographer carried the camera and captured the scenes along the way. Not long after, a village suddenly appeared ahead, with large areas of abandoned farmland on both sides of the road, overgrown with weeds, almost 1 person tall. The explorers were not surprised. When the forbidden area appeared, a large number of cities were destroyed, and the village in front of them should also be one of the unfortunate towns that fell back then. Then the next second, something shocking happened to everyone. They actually saw an old man under a big tree at the village entrance. The old man lay on an old lounge chair, with a moldy fan on his legs and a withered breath emanating from his body. His eyes were tightly closed, and his chest did not fluctuate at all, like a corpse. Everyone was surprised. how could there be anyone in the penalty area? Unless there are other explorers who enter first, there can be no living people in the restricted area. However, this old man is so old that even walking is a problem. How could he be an explorer? And is he dead or alive? Orange suddenly became nervous. She was just an ordinary person with no weapons around her, and if anything happened, she would definitely be the first to suffer. If it weren't for being forced and helpless, she wouldn't have come to the C-level penalty area to die. Caught at the entrance of the village by such a strange old man, everyone hesitated for a moment. While hesitating, only someone whispered. This person's chest did not rise or fall, and there was no movement for a long time. He should have died. He is very likely a victim from 200 years ago, but for some reason his body did not decay. Everyone nodded to themselves, and this speculation was reasonable because from beginning to end, the old man did not show any abnormalities. It seems like it's really a corpse. They still didn't dare to be careless and quickly turned to look at the speaker, waiting for his next analysis. The speaker was a middle-aged man wearing glasses, looking very steady. He stared in the direction where the old man was, with a confident smile on his face. As a journalist, Orange naturally learned about the relevant information of the program participants and knew that this person's surname is Chen. Not only is he intelligent and decisive, but he is also an capable person, who can be said to be both intelligent and brave, very impressive. You should know that he is a senior explorer who once left the C-level penalty area alive. At this point, Orange couldn't help but feel hopeful, but gradually realized something was wrong. Everyone stared at the middle-aged man. Time passed by minute by second, but the middle-aged man remained silent. He remained motionless, his eyes dim, like a sculpture. A deathly silence. Orange gradually felt a chill on her spine, and Mr. Chen clearly had a problem. She saw the faint fear and doubt remaining in the other person's eyes. The explorer was very decisive, retreating one after another and distancing himself from the middle-aged man, ready to take action at any time. Just as everyone was skeptical, the corners of the middle-aged man's mouth suddenly overflowed with blood, his body slowly fell to the ground, but his face still wore a confident smile, completely devoid of breath. He's dead. This eerie scene made everyone present's scalp tingle, but it was just a matter of speaking, and this guy actually died. He is a capable person. Even more terrifying things lie ahead. As the middle-aged man fell to the ground, everyone realized that there was a little girl standing behind him, with a cute ball-shaped head, red lips and white teeth, like a porcelain doll. Their backs were cold because the girl was holding a tongue that had been pulled out by the roots. So Mr. Chen died when this child pulled out his tongue. Orange instantly reacted, feeling a surge of excitement all over her body. She quickly took a few steps back and hid behind a group of explorers. As everyone was on guard, this strange little girl also turned her head to look at them, her dark eyes filled with a cold sense of death. Next second, she threw her bloody tongue on the ground like throwing garbage, grinned and showed a malicious smile to everyone. The blood-stained index finger of her right hand was placed between her lips, and she first licked the fresh blood on her finger before gently uttering a syllable. Shoo. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Death of the Speaker. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Death of the Speaker. Bang. A gunshot shattered the silence of the deserted village. Faced with the threat, a strong man among the explorers chose to take the lead. The pistol in his hand was obviously modified and had astonishing power. The silencer at the muzzle seemed like a decoration and did not play any role. This shot was quite precise, and the eerie little girl flew backwards in an instant, leaving a big hole on her forehead and lying motionless on the ground. The strong man remained silent and turned around to give the old man on the lounge chair another shot, the same shot hitting his head. The crowd was amazed by his decisiveness and worried that such a loud noise might cause unknown trouble, so they decided to immediately move on. The strong man looked at the pistol and complained in a slightly imperceptible voice, "This garbage silencer has no effect at all." Suddenly, his voice came to a sudden halt, and a large amount of blood spurted out of his mouth. Everyone's pupils suddenly shrank, and they found that the tongue in the strong man's mouth had disappeared, indicating that he could not live long. The latter used his last bit of strength to turn his head and found that the little girl who had been shot in the head by him had actually climbed onto his shoulder, holding a hot tongue in his hand. Shoo! The little girl only had half of her head left, but she made another gesture of silence to everyone as if nothing had happened. What kind of monster is this? The strong man fell to the ground with fear and unwillingness, dying without closing his eyes. Orange took a cold breath and almost screamed, but fortunately managed to control herself in time. No speaking in the village. She trembled all over, feeling unusually cold behind her, as if a cold corpse was standing. She tightly covered her mouth and slowly turned her head, only to see the blood and flesh-blurred old man who had come behind her at some point and extended his hand covered in corpses. Once she makes a sound, her tongue will be pulled out. Although her mind was blank, the girl still tried her best to stay calm and quickly moved away from the old man. The latter has no movement. At a critical moment, the photographer signaled for everyone to evacuate immediately, but suddenly a large number of villagers appeared in the fields, blocking the road behind everyone. They were all wearing old clothes, with eerie smiles on their faces, and their index finger was placed between their lips. Shoo! The market in the village is quite quiet, with eerie figures standing at each stall. They wriggle their necks stiffly, and their gaze converges on a young man wearing a black sports suit. The latter was squatting in front of a fruit stall picking, when suddenly, as if he had found something, he looked towards the village entrance with great interest. "I was just wondering why there was no one in the market. It turns out something good happened in the village, and firecrackers have been set off." "What happened?" Seeing the vendor not answering, Bimodin felt bored and frowned. "Auntie, your fruit is obviously not fresh. Don't you have any better ones?" He shook his head in disappointment as he spoke. The vendor looked at him. Everyone in the market was watching him. They remained silent, and the air was eerily quiet. Some. I'll go get it for you." After a while, the vendor lady forced out a stiff smile. She struggled to speak, her voice hoarse, as if she had not spoken in a long time, and turned to walk towards the yard behind her. Not long after, she walked out of the yard trembling, carrying a basket in her hand and placing it on the stall. "Just picked. New. Fresh." Biemo picked up an apple casually, which was indeed big and round, and he was very satisfied in his heart. He pretended to be dissatisfied and said, "Although there are good things, you must choose something that is not fresh to sell. Auntie, you are not authentic." After pausing for a moment, he tentatively said, "How about it be cheaper?" The lady smiled falsely and nodded, saying, "Okay, this time. It's my fault. Look. Look at it. Are you really looking at it?" "Yes." Without further ado, Biemo left with a yellow-green ticket and searched for the next stall. The lady accepted the money and saw the other person leave. The smile on her face instantly disappeared, and her expression was inexplicable. In no time, Biemo stood in front of a meat stall, looking at the strangely colored meat on the chopping board, his expression gradually becoming serious. "Boss, you meat. Meat. Why? Why? Why?" The meat vendor was a skinny middle-aged man with a pale expression. When he heard Bimo's words, he seemed to immediately become nervous. "This meat." Bimo's eyebrows furrowed deeper and deeper, as if he realized something was wrong. Throughout the entire market, the eyes of all the vendors flickered, casting a faint light, paying attention to Bimo's every move. "Shouldn't have been discovered." The middle-aged man smiled and trembled uncontrollably, as if thinking of something terrible. "This meat is very good." In a eerie intense atmosphere, Bai Mo's eyebrows gradually relaxed and he said with a hint of regret, "It's just a pity that I didn't have enough money with me. I'll have to buy again next time." As the words fell, he seemed to hear a long string of sighs of relief. He looked around in confusion, only to find that all the vendors were staring straight at each other, busy with their own affairs. Strange. Bai Mo shook his head and withdrew his gaze, looked at the vendor for a moment, then suddenly became curious and said, "Boss, why do you keep your right hand in your pocket as a meat seller?" As soon as these words were spoken, the air froze again. Under Bai Mo's scrutinizing gaze, the middle-aged man swallowed his saliva and awkwardly smiled, saying, "Old. The old saying goes well. Always. Keep a hand in everything." His voice trembled and he looked quite guilty. "Ha ha, boss, you're so humorous." After a brief silence, Bai Mo suddenly laughed and said to himself that the village was quite interesting, why hadn't he noticed it before? As he was about to leave, he turned his head to the vendors and said, "When I bring enough money next time, I will definitely take care of everyone's business." "Okay." The middle-aged man's smile did not diminish, but he let out a wail in his heart. "Please, don't come." Bai Mo did not notice the unusual expressions of the crowd, but stopped in his tracks. At the same time, all the vendors looked unusually eerie, turning their heads and looking in one direction together. I saw a man and a woman running towards me not far away. The man was still carrying a camera, and both of them looked frightened, both physically and mentally exhausted. Orange is about to despair. It is not easy to remain silent in the village of silence. Along the way, there were constant scares and illusions, and many explorers inexplicably had their tongues pulled out. Vaguely, she seemed to have seen a strange force that shouldn't have appeared in the C-level penalty area. Fortunately, she kept biting her tongue tightly and covering her mouth tightly, which was how she managed to survive until now. Suddenly, Orange noticed that the photographer in front of her was powerless and kneeling on the ground. The camera was thrown aside, indicating that she had completely given up and was ready to wait in place to die. She was taken aback for a moment, looked around, and her heart sank to the bottom. Surprisingly, everyone around was human. No, it's not human. The entire village of Buyu is a monster. I can't escape any more. Despair enveloped her heart, and Orange knew that she would eventually die in this village. She was already physically exhausted, relying solely on a will to survive to sustain herself until now. In despair, she suddenly collapsed and was about to fall to the ground. However, at this moment, she was promptly supported by a pair of strong arms. "Are you okay?" Orange lifted her head and saw a handsome young man with pale skin in front of her. She looked at Fang Jing curiously, her eyes agile, clearly different from those corpse-like monsters. "I didn't." She was about to respond out loud, but suddenly woke up. "It was an illusion, a monster trying to trick me into speaking." Her teeth were trembling, struggling to detach from the other person's arm, and she huddled her hands on her knees against the wall, trying not to make a sound. Seeing this, the photographer also followed and planned to take this opportunity to rest well. After all, he couldn't run away. He just looked at Bai Mo and was also thinking about what this guy was. "What's wrong with you?" Bai Mo was not sure why, but after several unsuccessful communications, he believed that the two needed help and needed to seek help from several vendors. "No, don't let them come over, they're all monsters." Orange couldn't help but shout out loud. The photographer wanted to cover her mouth, but there was no time, and her heart sank instantly. Orange also realized something, and her face turned pale as death. As time passed, the two of them exchanged a glance, both seeing the astonishment on each other's faces. "Why? I'm actually okay." "Monsters." At the same time, Bai Mo looked back suspiciously and saw the villagers grinning with extra effort. So he looked at the two people with constantly changing expressions again and said with a smile, "The villagers are all very kind. Why do you say they are monsters? What happened?" At this moment, Orange's gaze was dull. She saw it, but how could it be when this guy turned around just now? Those monsters actually laughed. Did you laugh? However, as the other person turned their head, the expressions of those monsters instantly became gloomy, as if they had taken off their hypocritical masks. A spiritual light flashed through my mind, and a thought suddenly came to mind. Monster. Afraid of this guy? Yes. I didn't die not because the monsters were kind, but because they didn't dare to kill in front of this guy. Orange suddenly became excited, as if she saw a way out. Although it may not be a normal person who can make monsters afraid, this is currently the only way to survive. Take a gamble. After weighing, she gathered the courage to probe and said, "Can you take us out of here?" "Why?" Buyu appeared somewhat puzzled. I'm temporarily homeless." "And is he too?" Buyu thought for a moment and pointed to the photographer. The photographer remained vigilant, he remained silent and nodded hesitantly. Buyu remained silent. The air gradually froze, and gaze converged one after another, as if everyone was waiting for his decision. "Okay, I can take you to my house to stay overnight, but as an exchange, you need to help me get some things." After a while, Buyu sighed and pointed to the pile of environmentally friendly bags behind him. "Where is your home?" Orange asked. "Oh, it's a bit far away. It's not in this village and we'll have to walk a long way." Buyu thought for a moment and suggested, "How about I help you ask the villagers and stay at their house for a night?" "No, no, no, no." Orange's face turned pale upon hearing this, perhaps feeling a bit strange about her behavior. She quickly found a lame excuse and said, "If it's far away, someone must help you with something." "Well, that's right, let's go then." Buyu nodded and helped the girl on the ground. Orange stood up and followed carefully, watching the young man bid farewell to the vendors with a strange atmosphere. The photographer picked up the camera and followed the two without saying a word. Seeing everyone enjoying themselves, their expressions inexplicably blurred. He let go of all his vigilance and walked to a meat stall. He patted the vendor's shoulder and said with a smile and emotion, "It seems that you have a good relationship with this guy." The tone is relaxed and casual, it's even more natural than a flower bush old hand picking up girls. The vendor remained silent, but his expression became particularly eerie. He extended his right hand, which had been hidden in his pocket. There were no palms on his wrist, only wriggling tongues. The air remained quiet for 2 seconds. The smile on the photographer's face gradually solidified, as if waking up from a dream, and the cold sweat completely soaked his back. He tried to ask for help, but couldn't speak at all. He could only watch helplessly as the vendor had another bloody red tongue on his hand. That's his tongue. All the vendors were staring at him, as if looking at a corpse. Goodbye. Before closing his eyes, he heard the vendor's cold farewell sound. Photographer, die. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Tomb Guardians. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Tomb Guardians. The photographer is dead. Orange turned around and saw the photographer standing motionless in front of the meat stall, feeling a strong sense of sadness in her heart. She is a completely ordinary person, and if it weren't for the photographer's care all the way, even if she didn't die, she would have been trapped in the village by the monsters of the silent village. Why hasn't he left? Buyu also stopped in his tracks. Orange suppressed her sadness and shook her head, saying, "He's different from me. He wants to go home." Oh, Buyu nodded and casually left the village with an orange. "By the way, don't be afraid later," he suddenly reminded halfway through. "What's wrong?" "I am a tomb keeper, so I live in the cemetery." Tomb. Cemetery. Orange stiffened all over and couldn't help but secretly look at Buyu's pale skin. Speaking of which, this person's skin is simply too white, probably not the result of cosmetics. She quietly swallowed her saliva. In her perception, there was a forbidden zone creature called a vampire whose skin was very white, with a cruel nature and a love for blood-sucking, but she couldn't speak. Yes, so when we meet the coffin and tombstone, you don't have to worry too much. Oh. Oh. The two of them didn't stop, walked through the foggy road, and finally arrived at the cemetery. Seeing the neatly arranged tombstones in front of her, Orange couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this place was not as gloomy as she had imagined. She followed behind Buyu and walked along a narrow path towards the house, suddenly curious, why aren't there any inscriptions on these tombstones? Who knows? After a moment of silence, Buyu said without looking back, I'm just a tomb keeper, responsible for guarding this cemetery. Who knows so much about the rest? Orange was lost in thought. There are indeed many cemeteries in the third city. Although there may not be any information about this place, you can still try to check it when you go back. If I could go back alive. The surroundings are too quiet, there are no insects or birds chirping, and even no green plants are visible, as if there are no living creatures. This place is so desolate, she said, aren't you alone? Why do you feel lonely? Buyu pushed open the door and turned his head to look at Orange inexplicably. He said strangely, I'm not alone. So. Orange smiled and her expression suddenly became dull. She shrank her neck and looked around in confusion, only to see rows of cold tombstones. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva and forced a smile, is there still someone else here? Buyu didn't answer and walked straight into the room. Orange froze in place, feeling as if there were countless pairs of eyes scrutinizing her behind her. Suddenly, she was inspired and quickly followed in. Of course, she could see that neither the cemetery nor the so-called tomb keeper was normal, but she had no intention of escaping for the time being. Compared to facing unknown dangers outside, at least her current situation is relatively safe. The room is not large and quite rudimentary, with no electronic devices visible. Even the stove used for cooking is very primitive and requires dry wood to start a fire. Buyu lowered his head and began to deal with the things he had bought. Without lifting his head, he said, I'll cook. You can sit anywhere you like. Orange can't understand the other person's background, how dare they eat and drink for free? What if the other person gets angry and treats themselves as food? That's so embarrassing. She quickly sat down in front of the stove, picked up an old-fashioned lighter, and looked at it briefly. She panicked and said, how about I help you light the fire? After thinking for a moment, Buyu nodded and said, okay, today's meal will be very special. After all, we found an ingredient that we haven't seen in a long time. Ingredients. Orange was about to ask what it was, but suddenly came to his senses. Wait, the ingredients he mentioned, you don't mean me, do you? She hurriedly lifted her head and happened to meet the smiling eyes of the other person, as well as the bleeding kitchen knife in their hand. Duh. Gulu. The sound of blood dripping and saliva swallowing echoed simultaneously, creating a subtle atmosphere. Orange forced herself to calm down, and she let go of her thoughts, intending to start the fire first to avoid being unable to resist her wild thoughts. But because she had never used this kind of stove before, coupled with her fear, she was so busy that she didn't light the fire for half a day and instead made herself look disheveled. Buyu couldn't help but sigh when he saw it. Upon hearing this, the girl couldn't help but think of something. She immediately shrank her neck and looked frightened. He chuckled to himself, and the girl didn't know what had happened. Like a frightened bird, he walked up to the stove, gesturing for the other person to leave, and said, let me come. I'm afraid you won't be able to eat tomorrow morning like this. Orange walked to the side in a daze, and soon saw a flame rising and swaying. Even with only sporadic light and warmth, it made her feel much more at ease. The young man's pale face flickered in the firelight, and she looked at it with less fear. So she said, by the way, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Mo Qingcheng, and I am a journalist. Ching Ching. Buyu looked up and down at the girl, nodding in agreement. It's really pretty. Ching Ching's face turned red and he explained for a while before letting the other party know which two words were. My name is Buyu. It seems that he is also afraid of being misunderstood, so Buyu explained seriously, Bai who indulges in prostitution, Mo who has no ink on his mind, It's not white foam spitting out from his mouth. Can't you put together a better word? Ching Ching had a strange expression on his face, but he breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. From what he saw so far, this guy didn't seem like a monster. At least not a difficult monster to deal with. She mustered up the courage and was about to ask about the village, but suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by a clang sound outside the house. What sound? She listened carefully, but found nothing. She thought it was her own illusion and was about to continue asking, but once again she heard a clanging sound, even louder than the first time. Did you hear any sound? She was a bit scared. After all, this was a cemetery, and who knew there was something strange there? There is no grass growing outside, and no living creatures can be seen. The most common things are tombstones and coffins. Buyu had already set the fire ablaze and replied, No. No. Ching Ching waited for a moment, but the voice no longer appeared. She was determined to delve into the village of Buyu to the end, and once she had prepared her mind, she was about to speak again. Almost at the same time, a more violent clang sound sounded outside, with considerable noise and movement. This time was not an illusion, as Buyu had already frowned and walked out of the kitchen, opening the door outside. Ching Ching quickly followed and just glanced outside, his face instantly changed. In the twilight, the coffin boards in the deep pit kept bouncing up and down, undulating like huge black hail, making a dull sound. What is this? The body playing with the coffin board. Ching Ching's heart was pounding with fear. She dared not approach the coffin and quickly turned her head to look at Buyu, whose face was as heavy as water, as if brewing something. She had actually noticed the yellow talisman on the door for a long time, and after some association, she suddenly realized it. I know now, maybe is it possible that Buyu is a Taoist? That's not right. Can Taoists control the monsters in the restricted area? In order to become a good journalist in the forbidden area, she has done a lot of homework in advance and knows that in the past, there have been practitioners such as monks and Taoists who have explored the forbidden area. But so far, she has not seen or heard of anyone who can reach the point where life in the penalty area feels fearful. She stared at Buyu intently, expecting him to do something, but after waiting for a long time, she only received a helpless cry from the latter. Good night, come on. Good night. Who is he talking to? A eerie scene occurred, and as Buyu's words fell, the coffin stopped moving, and all the sounds disappeared. Everything that had just happened seemed to be just an illusion. Ching Ching was shocked and pale. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Buyu sing softly. Sleep fast, little one. The night has fallen low, the bedside is covered in roses accompanying you to sleep, baby. Baby song urges you to sleep, sleep fast, little one. Moonlight fills the earth, a gentle breeze blows gently, baby. Baby, the song urges you to sleep. Buyu's voice was very soft, so he sang a lullaby to the coffin at night. However, upon seeing such a strange scene, Ching Ching not only did not feel fear, but also inexplicably calmed down. At the same time, as sung in the song, night falls quietly, and the moonlight covers the earth, as if casting a white veil over the cemetery. The night breeze is soft and gentle, completely devoid of the coldness of the cemetery. Ching Ching widened his eyes. What exactly is this place and who is Buyu? At the same time, she suddenly realized something. These coffins seem to be preventing me from asking Buyu about Buyu village. At this point, she was afraid that continuing to talk too much would cause trouble, so she remained silent and followed Buyu into the room in fear. Dinner was quickly prepared. The so-called special ingredient in Bai Mo's mouth is not her, but a fish. Seeing this, the girl breathed a sigh of relief and was also curious. She couldn't see anything special about this fish, but felt that it tasted very good, much better than the artificially farmed fish she had eaten before. Since the emergence of restricted areas, rivers and oceans have been no longer easy areas for humans to step into. Even without the barriers of restricted areas, facing the ever-changing waters, it is difficult to determine who the hunter is between humans and wild fish. After dinner, Bai Mo planned to make a floor for Mo Qingqing. He walked into the bedroom and soon let out a scream of surprise. Mo Qingqing quickly ran over. There were no lights in the room, and under the candlelight, she saw Bai Mo examining a coffin placed in the room, with a gritted teeth look. Like the one in the cemetery, this coffin was also pitch black, but it was clearly opened by someone. The coffin board was tilted to one side, and inside it was empty with no trace of a corpse. Bai Mo looked angry and said, Who stole the body? Compared to this, Mo Qingqing was more concerned about another issue. She hesitated and said, Well, why did you put the coffin in the room? It's not important, what's important is that someone came in and stole the body. Bai Mo was both anxious and angry. No, this is very important. Okay, Mo Qingqing has a strange expression. Who would a normal person put a coffin in a room? And also, she looked around and saw that there was not even a bed in the entire room except for the coffin, while Bai Mo had just claimed that this was his bedroom. Steadily glancing at Bai Mo, who was infuriated, she had a ridiculous idea in her heart, but she dared not tell the other person. Perhaps it was not someone who stole the body, but the body itself ran out of the coffin. And the body that escaped, it's just Bai Mo himself. But Bai Mo obviously didn't think so. He searched the room for a long time, even lifting the coffin, but still found nothing. Finally, he made a difficult decision. Alarm, it must be called. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. My body was stolen. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 4. My body was stolen. Early the next morning, Bai Mo left the cemetery with Mo Qingqing. After thinking for a moment, he walked directly towards Buyu village. Well, can we not walk towards the village? Recalling yesterday's terrifying experience, Mo Qingqing's face turned pale, but he still tried his best to maintain calmness. Why? It's too far from the village. She quickly found an excuse and secretly looked at Bai Mo's face. Is that right? Bai Mo was taken aback for a moment, suddenly showing confusion and awkwardly saying, But I don't quite remember where to enter the city area from. I remember, just walk east. Being able to walk a little less is a good thing. Bai Mo accepted Mo Qingqing's proposal and the two of them headed east, with occasional thin mist appearing around them, constantly circulating and spreading, like the breath of some kind of giant life. I don't know if it's an illusion, but Mo Qingqing always feels like there are a pair of terrifying eyes hidden in the fog, staring at her with ill intentions. She couldn't help but shudder at the thought that she might still be within the penalty area. Fortunately, there were no abnormalities along the way. At the moment of seeing the black stone monument standing by the tree stump, Mo Qingqing's heart hung high all night before completely falling back into his stomach. For a moment, his emotions were mixed with sadness and joy. Fortunately, she knew she had made the right bet and had been worried for so long. Finally, she was able to leave the penalty area alive. Although this guy named Bai Mo beside her was strange, he didn't seem like a monster. On the contrary, the other party is her life-saving benefactor. Sadly, it was because everyone on this show, except for her, had died, including the photographer who had always taken good care of her, which she found difficult to accept at the moment. Moreover, due to the camera being lost in Buyu village, she was unable to bring back the exploration video and had to return empty-handed. This means that everyone else died in vain. Fortunately, this exploration was not completely fruitless. She had been running around in Buyu village for so long and had some valuable information about this new restricted area. If the company allows, she plans to release this intelligence as soon as possible after returning, without seeking anything else, just hoping that an explorer can completely eliminate the village of silence and avenge the deceased photographer. Thinking of the photographer, Mo Qingqing quietly clenched the note in his pocket. Buyu village. Where did this stone tablet come from? I've never seen it before. As she was stunned, Mo was looking at the black stone tablet in front of her with great interest. The stone tablet was about half a person tall, with the three big characters, Buyu Cun, engraved in blood on top and the letter C engraved below. The speaker has no intention, the listener has a heart. Mo Qingqing was slightly taken aback at the words. It was actually the first time Mo had seen the Forbidden Area stone tablet. How could this be? The existence of restricted areas is common sense, how could anyone not know? Could it be that Mo has always lived in a cemetery, so he doesn't know much about the outside world? No, from what Mo said before, it is obvious that he has entered the urban area. Can you say all the clues so far have been connected in her mind, and she has come up with a bold conjecture? Looking at the black stone tablet, Mo Qingqing's mood couldn't help but suppress a bit. Buyu village is too terrifying. All the explorers have no room for resistance, and without even a chance to make a move, they inexplicably make a sound and have their tongues pulled out. This sense of despair doesn't seem like the level of danger that a level penalty area should have. So, how terrifying would this guy in front of me, who can make all the monsters in the village feel scared? Let's go. Suddenly, Mo spoke and interrupted her thoughts. He no longer paid attention to the stone tablet and walked quickly towards the city with the girl. Mo Qingqing knew that the main reason why Mo was so urgent was because he wanted to quickly find the lost body. However, she always felt in her heart that the so-called corpse mentioned by the other party was actually Mo herself. Guess it, she dare not say this idea. Looking up, Mo Qingqing finally breathed a sigh of relief as he saw Mo step out of the stone tablet's range. It is common knowledge that life cannot leave the penalty area, so this can be completely confirmed. White ink is not a creature in the restricted area. A room filled with red envelopes. The walls on all sides emitted soft white light, with red lines interweaving recklessly, hanging countless red envelopes in the air, and a black wind chime hanging at the edge of each line. As Mo stepped out of the penalty area, a red envelope fell to the ground without warning. A hurried and chaotic wind chime rang in the room, and someone hurried into the room to open the envelope on the ground. Attention! 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 At the beginning of the letter were 6 shocking blood-colored characters. The viewer's heart sank, and when he saw the content below, his hand trembled and his expression changed greatly. Taboo Sequence S. Tomb Keeper suspected to have awakened, with a 69% chance of entering the 3rd city of Dongyang City. Its characteristics are as follows. The whole city is on guard. If necessary, abandon the city and evacuate. Please take corresponding measures immediately. After entering the urban area, Mo bid farewell to Mo Qingqing. He didn't delve into whether the girl was really homeless, he just took her in for a night, and just thought it was a small favor for her. After only staying in the cemetery for a few days, the changes in the urban area have become so significant. Seeing a city that was completely different from what he remembered, Mo looked shocked and quickly regained his senses. He stopped a taxi and rushed to the police station. The car quickly arrived at its destination, and Mo dropped a banknote and got off the car, casually saying, "You don't need to change." The driver's heart immediately felt happy upon hearing this. I haven't seen such a generous passenger in a long time. He sighed in his heart and glanced at the banknotes on his seat, his smile gradually solidifying. Rubbing my eyes, I picked up the money and looked at it twice to make sure I didn't read it wrong. Nether coins. Nether coins. This is the first time I've seen someone put a big sum of money in a ghost coin. The driver was both surprised and afraid. If it weren't for daylight now, he might have been scared out of bed by this thing in his hand. Seeing that Buyu was about to leave, he rolled down the car window and let out a loud roar. "Stop, kid, don't leave. What's going on?" Buyu turned around in confusion and saw the driver raise the banknote in his hand. He suddenly realized and smiled, waving his hand. "You really don't need to change. It won't cost much to make a car. I'm worried you won't be able to change it." "Nonsense. Where the hell am I going to find 1,000,000 yuan of nether coins for you?" The driver was so angry that his teeth were itching. This kid dared to tease him in front of the police station. I don't know if it's a brain problem. "You're so brave, Ming." He was about to curse, but suddenly there was no sound. A smiling young man walked to the taxi, listened for 2 seconds by the car window, and then looked at Buyu. The driver said, "Even with this little money, do you think he can't find it? Don't look down on people." Driver. Fuck your mother. He cursed loudly in his heart, but shrank his neck and dared not speak out. Damn it, this guy didn't stay at the Prohibition Bureau. Why did he come to the police station? The young man glanced at him and continued to say to Buyu, "He also said that he has secured the 93 yuan today. Who dares to stop him and who is in a hurry?" Buyu was taken aback and saw that the driver had actually taken out 93 yuan from his pocket and handed it to the young man. He then slammed on the gas pedal and hurriedly left. The young man watched the taxi leave, walked to Buyu's side, handed him the money, and then turned to walk towards the police station without saying anything during the process. Only Buyu remained in the same place and sighed. This driver has a real temperament. The young man looked at the target behind him with his spare light, and saw that the other person was not paying attention. He casually touched the miniature microphone on his collar. "Keep up with the car just now and give the driver 200 yuan as compensation." "Nonsense, of course it's for the bureau to reimburse. Is this something I can teach you? By the way, did he just exceed the speed limit? Remember to ask him to pay a 200 yuan fine." "Nonsense, of course I'll keep it safe. These guys always think about my meager salary." Every day young people sneer in their hearts. Hearing the footsteps behind him, he once again touched his collar, turned his head, and smiled as he looked at Buyu who was following him. Buyu also looked at him curiously and said, "Are you also here to report the case?" "No, I'm a police officer and I'm a bit late for work," he said casually. As he spoke, he presented his police ID card to Buyu, who glanced at it and quickly took note of the name on the document, Lu Zhan. "That's really great." Buyu's eyes lit up and he quickly said, "Police officer, you must help me. I lost the body in my room." "The body in the room?" Along with Lu Zhan, all the passing police officers cast wary glances at him, and even more so, they silently touched their waist and surrounded him. Buyu was as sharp as a thorn in his back. He looked around and only then did he realize that he was treating me like a criminal. With this in mind, he quickly explained the cause and effect of the incident. Upon hearing this, everyone felt reluctant to leave, occasionally turning back to look at him with a look of doubt in their eyes. Buyu's face stiffened. "Do I look like a criminal? Alright, don't even look at it. After work, hurry up and go eat." Lu Zhan let out a reprimand, and the police officers finally dispersed. After work. Buyu's face looked bewildered. "Didn't you just be a little late, so you're off work now?" "It's indeed 1 billion points late," Lu Zhan laughed. "Come in and explain in detail." The two of them arrived at the duty room. "I'll repeat it again, you, Buyu, are a tomb keeper. Yesterday morning, you went out to buy groceries, and in the afternoon, you returned to the cemetery only to find that the body in the room was lost in the evening. Is that correct?" "That's right." Lu Zhan touched his chin and said thoughtfully, but why did you put the body in your own room? This is not the point is that the body was stolen, Buyu said seriously. Yes, that's not the point. Fuck it. Who would a serious person put a corpse in their own room? Lu Zhanxiang suppressed the urge to curse and let out a dry cough before continuing to ask, is there anything else I need to add? Let me think. There really is. Buyu said sorrowfully, as if thinking of something. I reported Huangquan supermarket. It's really malicious of me to dare to sell expired products. I only bought their things a few days ago and they all broke down. Huangquan supermarket. Is there a place called Huangquan supermarket in City 3? You can check and view. Seeing the other party's face filled with righteous indignation, Lu Zhan remained calm and asked a few more details in detail. Seeing that he had asked everything he could, he said, the loss of the body is not a small matter. We will follow up as soon as possible. Just leave a phone number and you can leave. I don't have it. No. Lu Zhan frowned. Does this really affect your handling of the case? Seeing the other person's strange expression, Buyu felt embarrassed and said, I only found out yesterday that my phone couldn't be found. No, that's right. Lu Zhan shook his head, with a bright smile on his face. He waved and took a delicate box from the police officer beside him. Congratulations, you have won. As you are the 99th reporter of this month, we hereby offer you a new mobile phone as a gift, along with a phone card. Winning. The white ink man was dumbfounded, even doubting his own ears. Can you still win by reporting a case? Keep up with the times, Lu Zhan said with a smile. Okay. Buyu was still a bit incredulous. He took the box and looked at it, his expression suddenly solemn. Lu Zhan's heart trembled and he suddenly became nervous. Did he discover it? This trial was a bit rushed between lightning and fire. He had already thought of many strategies, but found that his worries were unnecessary. I said, police comrades. The guy in front of me relaxed his expression and shook his head with emotion, saying. At the beginning of this month, over 900 reporters appeared. It seems that your direction of keeping up with the times is a bit crooked. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Taboo Sequence S. Tombkeeper. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Taboo Sequence S. Tombkeeper. Seeing Lu Zhan patting his chest and promising to retrieve the body as soon as possible, Buyu felt a lot of peace and left the police station with a stack of brand new cash. These money were exchanged with his old banknotes, and they are also his only remaining assets today. Just now, Lu Zhan told him that currencies are being adjusted in various places, and suggested that he should exchange old banknotes for new ones at the police station to avoid unnecessary troubles in the future. Buyu naturally didn't suspect him. After all, the police couldn't deceive anyone, so he simply exchanged the money. But vaguely, he always felt that something was not right. Isn't exchanging money what the bank should do? The police station didn't do a good job of public security, so why did they even start working part-time TSK? No wonder over 900 reporters can emerge at the beginning of the month. I don't know when the body will be found. He left with a heavy heart. As Buyu's figure gradually faded away, Lu Zhan's tense nerves gradually relaxed. He seemed calm, but his back was actually soaked in sweat. Put these dark coins away, they may be useful in the future. And, he added, the money just exchanged will be reimbursed by the bureau. Yes, said the police officer behind him with a bitter smile, then curious, Marine, what did that guy come from? How many times have you said it? Don't ask what shouldn't be asked. Lu Zhan glanced at him and said solemnly, remember, the cryptocurrency should be placed in a storage box and cannot be opened without my command. The latter wisely closed his mouth and left with a smirk. Lu Zhan stood still, lost in thought. In fact, not all the people present, including him, were actually police officers from the original police station. Most of them came from the Anti-Prohibition Bureau. Among everyone, only Lu Zhan knew how dangerous the situation just now was. A slight mistake could potentially lead to the downfall of the entire number 3 city. He walked towards the office and came up with information about the Taboo Sequence S. Gravekeeper in his mind. Taboo Sequence S. Tomb Keeper, active creature, with an appearance similar to that of a normal human male, unknown physical features, habits, special abilities, and clearance methods. Note that this is currently the third information inclusion of the Taboo sequence. Based on existing intelligence, the analysis results of its characteristics are as follows. Feature 1, the Tomb Keeper disregards the conventional rules of the restricted area and has the ability to enter and exit the restricted area at will. Feature 2. Tomb Guardians are familiar with basic human knowledge, language, and conventional logical cognition. Characteristic 3, after analysis, it is found that Tomb Guardians have their own unique thinking logic, and their understanding of the world seems to be still stuck before the emergence of the Forbidden Zone, around 2160 years ago. For any special thing that goes beyond self-awareness, Tomb Guardians may exhibit a certain degree of mental retardation and may eliminate the impact of the thing on themselves through a series of methods such as neglect, self-hypnosis, and logical distortion. After judgment, this may be some kind of self-protection mechanism of the Tomb Keeper. Insufficient information, no more features have been obtained yet. Attention! 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 We must not let the Tomb Keeper realize that the world has undergone drastic changes. Please use all feasible methods to ensure that it remains in a state of ignorance. Until that moment arrives. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Is it unimaginable? Lu Zhan furrowed his brows and once again realized the seriousness of the problem. The red envelope in the sequence room records a large amount of information about taboo sequences. Whenever a taboo sequence leaves the forbidden area, the corresponding envelope will fall. In past emergencies, letters have provided detailed explanations of the consequences of various taboo sequences, and have never used vague terms like unimaginable to express them. Habits unknown, special abilities unknown, clearance methods unknown even for taboo sequences with a danger level of S. This series of unknowns is enough to demonstrate the uniqueness of Tomb Guardians. As a taboo sequence prefixed with S, the level of danger for Tomb Guardians is beyond doubt, but it is unclear in which aspect its harm is reflected. Moreover, the taboo sequence of human activity seems to have appeared for the first time through just contact and exploration. Lu Zhan can now confirm that Buyu is a pure human, which is simply unbelievable. He never imagined that one day he would get along so well with a taboo sequence. But not to mention, being called out by S.level taboo sequences one by one, it feels quite satisfying. In fact, as early as 2 years ago, a containment plan for the taboo sequence S.Gravekeeper had been developed and implemented. At the first moment when the Tomb Keeper appeared, Dongyang City did not hesitate to launch this unprecedented containment plan. The City Prison Plan. As the name suggests, the so-called City Prison Plan is to use the entire number 3 city as a prison to accommodate tomb guards. The specific plan is to bring the entire third city back to its state of life 200 years ago, comprehensively restrict all sources of information such as the internet, videos, novels, music, etc., and prohibit the use of keywords such as extraordinary, forbidden zone, eerie, etc. in the third city. In short, it is to make the third city present as much as possible the image recognized by the Tomb Guardians. As early as 2 years ago, the Anti-Prohibition Bureau began to relocate more than half of the residents of the third city, with well-trained soldiers playing the role of indigenous people, in order to monitor and control the public opinion and information orientation of the entire city. A very important part of this plan is to transfer the extraordinary as much as possible. A city full of ordinary people is naturally more difficult for Tomb Guardians to detect anomalies. After various efforts, a large number of extraordinary people have left the third city, and those who cannot be transferred have signed an agreement promising not to use any extraordinary abilities in the urban area. Once the agreement is violated, the Anti-Prohibition Bureau will kill them on the spot and will not tolerate them. The Prohibition Bureau is the most terrifying violent organization in this era of restricted areas. Initially established specifically to clear restricted areas, it was also responsible for dealing with certain restless supernatural beings. Unlike explorers active on television programs, members of the Anti-Prohibition Bureau are mostly hidden behind the scenes and often only take action during missions, like assassins lurking in the dark, staring coldly at everyone. This is also one of the important reasons why extraordinary people can coexist harmoniously with ordinary people in this era. The core purpose of the prison plan is only one. That is to completely transform the third city into a city in the taboo sequence Gravekeeper's cognition, treating it as a false prison and accommodating the Gravekeeper. This plan has been secretly carried out, and only a few people know the specific content. Lu Zhan is one of them and the second person in charge of this task. Originally, Lu Zhan was still worried about how to quickly find the Tomb Guardian, but unexpectedly received an unexpected phone call. He had already concluded halfway through the conversation that what the other party described was likely the Tomb Keeper. It was precisely because of this intelligence that Lu Zhan chose to come to the police station to guard and solve the Nether Coin incident with great danger. He is not sure what the Tomb Keeper defines as an abnormal situation, but even a normal person would feel that something is not right after reading the coin, and he dare not gamble. From previous contact and probing, it can be seen that the target's response to abnormal events is indeed relatively slow, and it seems to have a talent for self-deception. According to the red letter, it is highly likely that the Tomb Guardian will be harmless if they only need to detect any abnormalities. Until that moment arrives. Lu Zhan leaned back in his chair and pondered, which moment is it? Marine team, the target has gone to Longbei Street. Do you need to send someone to follow? Suddenly, an inquiry came from outside the door, interrupting his thoughts. Longbei Street. No need, Blue Bay Street has arranged for our people. Let's also withdraw the people who are following us. Don't disturb the target unless it's necessary, just let it go naturally. He pondered for a moment, and his tone became a bit cold. By the way, go warn those restless transcendents again and let them all restrain themselves for me. Yes. The footsteps outside the door faded away, and the air gradually quieted down. Lu Zhan touched his chin and suddenly let out a sigh, worried, why is this girl related to the S.level taboo sequence? I hope there won't be any problems. There's no reason to lose the body on the Gravekeeper's territory. It's impossible that the explorer ran to the S.level restricted area and stole the body, right? Sigh, there's no clue. Where should I go to find the body? Speaking of which, it seems like there have been some cases related to corpses recently. There's been a lot of trouble, it's really a headache. He pressed his brow, his face showing distress. I, the captain of the Anti-Prohibition Bureau, actually wanted to help a taboo sequence find a body. Isn't this just a commotion? You must apply for overtime pay. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Blue Bay Street. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 7. Huangquan Extradition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Huangquan Extradition. Longbei Street is not big, but the shops are diverse. Buyu glanced over and found almost any strange and peculiar store names. Many signs are handwritten, with very messy handwriting, as if they were hastily created to cope with some kind of inspection. It seems like this is also a commercial street, but strangely, most shops are not open at this time. Even if I occasionally see a few open doors, Buyu couldn't find a single person after entering. He shook his head to himself. This place was particularly special, but the novelty would soon pass, and it seemed that there were not many merchants settling in. No wonder the whole street was so deserted. However, it's not entirely right. Even if a place like this is not considered a tourist attraction, it wouldn't be without anyone Buyu naturally didn't know, in order to minimize the probability of him coming into contact with explorers and detecting anomalies, except for the Prohibition Bureau's request that explorers should not come to Longbei Street recently. The explorer thought that there might be some big move by the Anti-Prohibition Bureau, perhaps capturing some terrifying person. It was too late for them to stay away one by one, and they dared not lean towards Longbei Street. Buyu couldn't help feeling regretful. He thought he could try to find a part-time job here. If you don't come over, then naturally you should have a good visit and consider yourself on vacation. He walked all the way and saw no one else except for the woman at the beginning. The empty street was silent, with only shadows as companions, but he didn't feel lonely either. So, Buyu walked and stopped for a while before suddenly noticing an open shop, which looked like a coffin shop, and his eyes lit up. Most people are quite taboo about coffins, thinking that it would be very unlucky to come into contact with them, so coffins are not commonly seen on weekdays. He didn't expect to see them here. Perhaps because he had been dealing with coffins in the cemetery for a long time, Buyu felt that this shop was somewhat friendly. Looking up, I saw the sign with 4 large black characters, Extradition from the Underworld, written on it, with a hint of dark red at the tip of the brush. The brush strokes were powerful and clearly from everyone's hands. It's quite artistic. Buyu didn't know much about calligraphy, he just thought these words were written beautifully. While feeling emotional, he saw the door of the coffin shop half closed, inside it was pitch black, and he didn't know whether it was open or not. Listening carefully, there were faint voices coming from the store, indicating that someone was probably there. He suddenly became interested and planned to go in for a good visit, while also buying some paper money to go back. Walking to the door, Buyu was about to push it in when he suddenly felt a strange gaze appearing on his body, as if someone was staring at him. But the streets are empty and there is not even a ghost's shadow to be seen, so where did anyone come from? Suddenly, he felt something in his heart, lowered his head, and saw a pale paper figure lying at the threshold. The size of a paper man's palm, with no detailed depiction of facial features on his face, only 2 large eyes painted. His gaze was cold, and his cheeks were crimson, appearing quite eerie. Paper people. Buyu was slightly taken aback, crouched down and picked it up. He felt that the paper figure was a bit cold, and its weight was a bit strange, much heavier than he had imagined. It can be seen that the eyes of the paper figures have been meticulously depicted, lifelike, but not vivid. Instead, they are dull and rigid, and even look a bit scared after a long time. Buyu looked at the paper figure for a moment, then stared at those eyes for a long time, as if they were looking at each other. After a while, he chuckled and put the paper figure back on the ground. It seems that I didn't sleep well last night. I actually had the illusion that this paper figure was looking at me. He shook his head as he was about to enter the store, only to hear the sound of conversation inside the room. Only one person asked, "This corpse should have just been brought here, right?" Corpse. Upon hearing these 2 words, Buyu stopped and stood at the door eavesdropping. The paper man, who had been lying motionless on the ground, rolled his eyes and quietly moved his body, as if he was about to climb down the threshold into the house. Buyu lowered his head in suspicion, and the paper figure quickly stopped moving. Quickly, another voice rang out in the room, speaking calmly, "It's true that it just came, but don't try to trick him. Why, don't you plan on selling it? I can offer double the price. It's useless to make any moves. This guy has some background, and I dare not make any moves until I understand the situation." Oh, the person who started speaking seemed interested. "And the body you didn't dare to change hands with. TSK, the sign for extradition from the underworld outside has been hung, and you dare not do business yet. Don't provoke me." The other person calmly said, "He's the student of the old guy with the inscription. Even if I dare to sell it, do you have the courage to buy it?" As the words fell, the room suddenly fell silent, and both of them fell silent at the same time. "I see, is it a monument?" At first, the person seemed to ponder for a long time before gritting their teeth and saying, "Buy. How dare you not buy?" His voice continued to ring, "I'm not hiding it from you either. I'm interested in the hands and eyes of this corpse. You can sell them to me for whatever price you want." The other person still disagreed and said, I dare not sell, otherwise once the matter is exposed, you and I will suffer. It's okay, it's still the same as before. You make a pair of prosthetic hands and eyes for the body, and then cremate it as soon as possible, no one can see it. It's impossible, it's too dangerous. It seems that he thinks this guy is too stubborn. At first, the person became a bit impatient. He lowered his voice and said in a seductive tone, "These hands are very useful, but it's not for me to use them myself, but for a big shot." "A big shot?" "Yes, a big character. I know you've been looking for materials for raising corpses." "That's right," the other person exclaimed excitedly, "do you have it in your hands?" Buyu only heard a cry of surprise, and then there was no movement. But he finally understood that the body mentioned by the two people in the coffin shop was not the one lost in the cemetery, but another body. But that's not important. Importantly, this coffin shop seems to be secretly engaged in the sale of corpses, and it seems that this is not the first time. After removing certain organs from the corpse, they actually create fake ones to deceive the deceased's family. According to past accounts, this method of destroying corpses is very malicious and will make it impossible for the deceased to bury themselves in peace. Although Buyu does not believe these things, as a tomb keeper, he also has some feelings for corpses, and naturally hates this kind of business. Moreover, looking at the familiar way the two of them in the room are, I'm afraid they've been earning a lot of unscrupulous money in recent years. Thinking of this, Buyu quietly moved away from the coffin shop, staring at the store door while taking out his phone to call Lu Zhan. There are at least 2 people in the shop, and 2 fists are unbeatable with 4 hands. He naturally wouldn't rush into the coffin to make a declaration of justice, which is a foolish behavior. Call the police if you have trouble. This is the wisest choice at present. In front of the coffin shop, a paper figure the size of a palm lay on the doorstep, about to climb into the house, but Buyu stared fixedly at the shop entrance. Under this line of sight, it dared not move any further. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Don't worry, there's no problem. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Don't worry, there's no problem. The efficiency of the police station was very high, and soon Buyu heard the sound of police sirens outside Blue Bay Street. Lu Zhan, dressed in casual clothes, led several police officers through the alley and entered the Blue Bay Street. Buyu had been waiting in place all along. When he saw everyone appear, he quickly welcomed them and led them to the coffin shop. "Officer Lu, this is where I heard 2 people talking about trading corpses with my own ears, and they are still inside." Lu Zhan nodded. He had just learned the general process of the whole thing over the phone. "But to be honest, you are a taboo sequence. If you don't stay in the restricted area properly, why are you still on the path of cracking down on crime?" he secretly rose to himself when he saw someone secretly pointing to the sign of the coffin shop, and whispered. "The Marines are the extradition of Huangquan." Lu Zhan remained unmoved and straightened his expression. He first signaled for Buyu to step back, and then gave a glance to a police officer. The latter instantly understood and kicked open the partially open store door, quickly rushing in with a few police officers. "Don't move." At this moment, 2 people were standing in the coffin shop. There are several semi-transparent coffins in the room, each with a cold corpse lying inside. They are of all ages and their remains are well organized, as if they have fallen asleep. Paper money, cryptocurrency, candles. Various commonly used items in daily life are haphazardly piled up in corners, and colorful paper is scattered all over the ground. The center of the room is the most empty, with a red coffin standing upright at the center, covered in thick chains that look quite eerie. The 2 people in the room were both extraordinary. They had long heard the sound of the police siren outside and noticed the movement outside. A person with a scar on their face frowned. "The police are here," he said. "Don't worry," said another middle-aged man, who was not tall and had a rather weathered appearance, with a faint smile. "They were just passing by, not looking for us." Before the words could be spoken, the door of the coffin shop was fiercely kicked open. Scared Face was about to breathe a sigh of relief when he saw a twitch at the corner of his mouth and slowly turned his head to look at the short man. "Didn't you say? They came to find us." The short stature was clearly stunned for a moment, but soon regained composure and chuckled lightly. "Don't worry, how could you be unprepared for our profession? I had anticipated a similar situation for a long time, so I had already prepared for it. Don't move. Hold your heads and squat in the corner." As he spoke, several police officers broke into the house, turned on the lights, searched around, and roared fiercely. Seeing these people coming from unkind sources, Scar's face hesitated a bit. However, thinking of what the short man said, "I've already taken care of it," I couldn't help but feel a little more confident. He showed composure and stood still in place. "What are you foolishly doing? I asked you to squat in the corner." Suddenly, a police officer stared at him fiercely. Scared Face had a dull expression. "Is this guy yelling at me? Hurry up." In a moment of confusion, he suddenly stumbled and got a solid kick from the other person. "That's you." Scarface opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but when she turned her head, she realized that the short man beside her had long disappeared, and her expression suddenly became a bit exciting. Looking at the corner of the wall, as expected, the guy was crouching with his head in a fairly standard posture. There is also a clear yellow footprint printed on the back. He weighed for a moment and reluctantly squatted down beside the short man, gnashing his teeth and saying, "You his mother. Didn't you say you had managed?" The short man chuckled and hesitated. "I don't know any of these people." Before Scarface could erupt, he quickly said, "Don't worry, they're just looking around and can't move us. You should know that I never leave evidence when I do things." Looking at his confident expression, Scarface suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. As expected, only one police officer sternly said, "We have received a report that someone here has been illegally selling corpses for a long time, and even more than 10 minutes ago, they were planning a sinister transaction of cutting hands and digging eyes." Scar's face trembled all over, and his expression turned numb as he said, "Didn't you say?" He is almost going crazy. It is obvious that their conversation just now was overheard. Is this his mother? No proof. It doesn't make sense. The short man shrunk his neck, and the paper man responsible for letting out the wind never gave any feedback, indicating that there should be no one approaching outside. "Did you encounter a master?" Despite this, he still did not panic. Seeing the scar on his face with an unpleasant expression, he breathed a sigh of relief and spoke out in relief. "Don't worry, most of the people doing business on Longbay Street are extraordinary. The police are not unaware of this, so they won't do anything to us. After all, selling corpses is not a big deal." During the conversation, the noisy room suddenly quieted down, and the fierce police officers stopped shouting and stood honestly to the side. A smiling young man walked into the coffin shop, casually scanning the room. His gaze lingered for a moment on the red coffin, then walked behind the squatting two and bent down to look at them. Scar's face felt a sensation, and he turned his head to meet the smiling young man. It doesn't matter if he didn't look, he almost passed away on the spot. He was even thinking, why not just find a coffin to lie in? Honestly, isn't this damn Lu Zhan? Isn't he working at the Prohibition Bureau? When did he switch to becoming a police officer? What are you shaking for? I said it's okay. I don't know why he's short, so I thought to myself that this guy might be too timid. With such psychological qualities, he dares to help people buy corpses. He turned his head in dissatisfaction and met a smiling face. The air remained quiet for a few seconds. Gulu. In the room, there was a clear and audible sound of drooling. Not bad, it seems that you all know me, so things will be easier to handle. Seeing these two guys being so timid, Lu Zhan felt bored. He stood up and stretched lazily, saying lazily, I heard someone is selling corpses here, are you too? As he spoke, he casually walked back and forth, checking the coffins in the store. Yes. It's us, Scar's face trembled as he spoke. Don't worry. Taking advantage of Lu Zhan's lack of attention, the short man forcefully suppressed his fear and said to him, I checked everything before collecting the bodies, but they were just some ordinary ones. The body you wanted was even an orphan during his lifetime, and the Anti-Prohibition Bureau wouldn't bother us with such a small matter. Also, have you forgotten? I have put up the sign of Huangquan extradition. The more he spoke, the more he felt at ease, but he saw Scar's face turn pale, and his gaze was like that of a fool. Scared face was almost about to cry, and he thought to himself, has this guy's mouth been wide open? Didn't he even notice what's wrong? Please stop talking, I just want to live a few more years, he pleaded. The short man was about to speak when suddenly his whole body trembled, feeling that the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped significantly. How could it be so cold? He felt uneasy in his heart, as if he had realized something, and quickly turned his head to look in a certain direction, sweating profusely. Somewhere in the room. Lu Zhan stopped in front of a coffin, staring intently at the body inside, unsure of what he was thinking. He no longer smiled, his face ugly and frightening. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Humanoid Air Conditioning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Humanoid Air Conditioning. Although it's not autumn yet, the temperature in the room is as low as winter. The police officers remained silent, curious about why the captain suddenly became angry, but they were all sensible and didn't ask much. In fact, anyone who has some understanding of Lu Zhan would not touch his mold at such times. Lu Zhan, the youngest captain of the Dongyang City Anti-Prohibition Bureau and one of the action leaders of the Third City, is an ice-type ability person. Although not well known among ordinary people, he is notorious in the circle of superhumans. He usually smiles, but his methods are actually quite ruthless. Coupled with his strong strength, he hardly knows what compromise is. He fully implements the action philosophy of the Anti-Prohibition Bureau's iron-blooded purge, which has disturbed Dongyang City more than once. There are many people who are unhappy with Lu Zhan, but he seems to be stubborn, but he always follows the rules in his actions, even if he reports it, it's useless. Many people know that Lu Zhan likes to pretend to be kind on a daily basis, but looking at his expression now, I'm afraid his mood is quite bad. The short man realized the seriousness of the problem. Don't think too much, I'm afraid the body inside the coffin is very important to Lu Zhan. But how could that be? Isn't that guy an orphan? His teeth were trembling, but he tried his best to maintain calmness and turned his head to look at Scarface. Fart. Whatever you say is farting. Scar's face was filled with anger, and he gritted his teeth to interrupt his words, fearing that the other person would just say a few more words and send him away. He looked at Lu Zhan and secretly stretched out his body, ready to take action. Being caught is not a big deal, but there are certain things that cannot be disclosed. Once caught, he is not sure that he can withstand the interrogation of the Anti-Prohibition Bureau. The short man hesitated for a moment, knowing that there was no way out at the moment, and also made plans to escape. After all, Lu Zhan relies entirely on his mood and his actions, and judging from that guy's expression, he may have already figured out what reason to kill them both. The police officers present were all from the Anti-Prohibition Bureau, and this was not their first mission. They knew what would happen if a superhero refused to arrest, so they were all prepared for battle. For a moment, the room was filled with a tense atmosphere of tension and tension. And at this moment, a figure walked into the coffin shop. Hiss. Why is it so cold? After Buyu entered the room, he shrank his neck and rubbed his hands, muttering, who would be so narrow-minded as to turn on the air conditioning so low. Everyone looked at him with a strange expression, and after hearing the 3 words, lacking in heart, they coincidentally shifted their gaze to Lu Zhan. The latter raised his head and looked around the room with cold eyes. Everyone quickly lowered their heads and dared not look at him. Scar's face secretly smiles, and his heart tells him where he came from. He dares to scold Lu Zhan like that. It's really his mother fun. Isn't Lu Zhan just a narrow-minded person? According to Lu Zhan's personality, he thought the boy would be scolded, but to his surprise, Lu Zhan not only didn't get angry, but also squeezed out a smile. Seeing this, Scarface and the short man exchanged a glance. Their expressions were particularly brilliant. What's the origin of this kid? How could he make Lu Zhan calm down? Officer Lu, have you caught the prisoner? When the 2 guessed, Buyu had already walked up to Lu Zhan's side. Got it, thanks to the clues you provided. Lu Zhan pointed to the 2 people squatting at the foot of the wall and said seriously, thank you so much. This is a heartfelt gratitude. He didn't expect to see Xiaowen here, let alone that Xiaowen's body was almost sold. Xiaowen is the younger brother of Lu Zhan, who has no blood relationship. They grew up in an orphanage and have a good relationship with each other. Although they have lost contact, it does not mean that this relationship has disappeared. At the moment of seeing the body, Lu Zhan was almost overwhelmed by certain emotions, which inadvertently led to his ability losing control and causing a sudden drop in temperature in the room. Fortunately, this did not seem to have caught the attention of the tomb guards, otherwise it might have led to a major disaster. It's nothing. Facing Lu Zhan's gratitude, Buyu waved his hand and looked in the direction of Lu Zhan's fingers. Are those 2 criminals? That's right, they have already investigated and confessed to the crimes they committed. For safety reasons, Lu Zhan plans to send Buyu away first and then investigate Xiaowen's matter afterwards. He always remembers the contents of the red letter, and once the tomb keeper detects something beyond his understanding, the consequences will be unimaginable. We cannot harm the entire number 3 city just because of a momentary impulse. The scarred face by the wall was stunned. No, I haven't said anything yet. How could it become a confession? I didn't fucking plead guilty. Despite constantly cursing in his heart, he just lowered his head and remained silent. That's good. Buyu nodded and looked around, wondering, strange, why is the room so cold? I didn't see any air conditioning anywhere. The air quieted down and no one answered. Faced with Buyu's gaze, Lu Zhan remained silent for a moment, walked to the corner of the wall, and fiercely kicked Scar's face. Excuse me, why is the room so cold? The latter was first taken aback, then filled with grief and anger. Why do you ask me why you did something good yourself? It's not because you used your abilities that you're so cold. But he wasn't a fool either. Knowing that he couldn't answer like that, he thought for a moment and probed. Perhaps because low temperatures are beneficial for preserving corpses. As soon as he spoke, Lu Zhan breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing Buyu showing a sudden realization, he took a deep look at Scar's face and thought to himself that this guy was quite clever. When he started later, he could be a little lighter. However, the problem with white ink did not end here. He said curiously, I understand the principle of low-temperature preservation of corpses, but where is the air conditioning? I haven't seen it yet. The air quieted down again. Seeing Lu Zhan looking at him again, his scar face hesitated and stuttered for a while. Before he could finish speaking, he inexplicably got kicked. The short man beside him couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Although everyone was like brothers and sisters, it didn't stop him from gloating. Officer, I really don't know about this. The coffin shop was opened by the dwarf next to me. Why don't you ask him? At this moment, the bitter voice of Scar's face rang out again. The short man, upon hearing this, instantly regained consciousness and looked up to find that everyone was staring at him. This guy actually sold me. He turned his head, only to see his scarred face and lips move slightly, silently saying 2 words. "Don't worry." The short man's mouth twitched, and he thought to himself that if he didn't answer, he wouldn't be able to do it. "The air conditioning is." After a moment of contemplation, a confident smile quickly appeared on his face. "The air conditioning is in this room, and it's also in the form of a personal air conditioning. Because this is actually the ability of the Marine Corps." Lu Zhanqi knew something was wrong, so he lifted his leg and gave him a cold kick, saying in a cold voice, "Don't be so clever. Be honest and speak well, understand?" However, it was too late, and Buyu had already heard Scarface's words clearly. He asked with great interest, "What humanoid air conditioner?" "Yes, yes." Feeling the warning gaze from Lu Zhan, the short stature was very aggrieved, and he didn't even know why the other party wanted to hit him. "Is my answer not exciting enough?" After hesitating for a while, he suddenly rolled his eyes and pointed to the red coffin in the room, saying, "That's it, this is the air conditioning in our store." Everyone looked in the direction of their fingers and saw a deep red coffin standing in the center of the house, wrapped in thick chains, appearing particularly eerie. But Buyu just looked curious and said, "Is this an air conditioner? It doesn't look like it's humanoid either." "Don't rush." Taking advantage of everyone's unpreparedness, the short man secretly placed his arms around his head behind him and made a few peculiar gestures to himself. A strange smile appeared on his face and he whispered, "The real air conditioner is inside this coffin." "Wow!" As the words fell, all the chains outside the red coffin broke and fell, making a loud collision sound. Lu Zhan secretly said that it was not good. He had just focused most of his attention on Buyu, but unexpectedly overlooked some people's small movements. The taboo sequence is right behind him, and he dare not use his abilities. He can only watch helplessly as the coffin board of the red coffin falls, making a loud noise. Bang! The temperature in the room suddenly dropped by a few points. Feeling the strange aura ahead, everyone couldn't help but sink in their hearts. After about 3 seconds, smoke and dust fell, and the banknotes scattered. Everyone looked at the coffin, their pupils slightly contracting. I saw inside the coffin a green and gray female corpse dressed in theatrical costumes stood proudly. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. This corpse is portraying me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. This corpse is portraying me. The female corpse's face turned green, with long black hair curled up high and delicate makeup on her face. Her eyes were tightly closed, her forehead was pressed against a yellow talisman, and her black and purple nails were pointed and long, looking quite frightening. Zombie corpse control. Lu Zhan instantly realized. The so-called superhumans do not specifically refer to those who possess abilities, but rather to a group of people who possess far greater power than ordinary people. Since the emergence of the penalty area, various forces have emerged one after another, but there are only 2 mainstream extraordinary systems, capable individuals and practitioners. These 2 systems are typical representatives of innate ability and acquired ability, and the threshold is not low. Corpse control is a type of Taoist technique in the practitioner system, which can refine corpses into zombies and act according to the will of the practitioner, invincible and with astonishing killing power. It is worth mentioning that the term Taoism here does not refer to traditional Taoism in the past, but rather to a collective term for all current cultivation techniques. Looking at the motionless body, Lu Zhan's heart sank. He knew that the reason why the body remained silent was because there was a yellow talisman attached to its forehead. And once the yellow talisman is exposed, things become troublesome. Dealing with a zombie naturally won't take him too much effort, but the key now is that none of this can be seen by the tomb keeper. A moving corpse obviously goes beyond Buyu's inherent cognition, so he must not be allowed to discover it. Meanwhile, the short stature and scarred face in the corner were whispering to each other. The short man gritted his teeth and said, "Don't worry, I'll have the zombies stop them right away, and we'll take the opportunity to escape. Remember to run faster later, I can only let the zombie stop me for a while, otherwise she will get hurt, understand? Upon hearing the words, rest assured, Scar's face trembled, but he still nodded solemnly. The air froze for a moment. The next second, the yellow talisman in front of the female corpse's forehead quietly fell without wind. Right now. The short man let out a loud roar, and the two of them suddenly jumped up and ran towards the door. However, they quickly froze. I saw everyone turn their heads and look at them with a very strange look. No, shouldn't they be dealing with zombies now? The short man felt bewildered and turned his head to see that the yellow talisman on the forehead of the female corpse in the coffin had disappeared. His gray and blue face was revealed, but he still closed his eyes and remained motionless. Not moving. He secretly pinched the formula, but no matter how his gestures changed, the female corpse remained motionless. I'll go. At a critical moment. I'm hanging up. The short man wanted to cry without tears, he could feel the close connection between him and the female corpse, but the more he did, the more he couldn't understand the current situation. I'm sure I can't run away. Because Lu Zhan has already taken action. The legs under the pants of the short two were already covered with a layer of hard ice. I'm so stupid, really. Scar's face beside him looked dull and murmured, I know I can't let you say those two words, I know I should have cut off your tongue sooner. Buyu looked at the two people who suddenly jumped up and stopped, and curiously said, what is their situation? The delusion of running away is even worse. Lu Zhan explained and then touched his chin, feeling lost in thought. I just secretly used my ability, but the Tomb Keeper didn't make any changes. Does this mean that the Tomb Keeper's ability to capture anomalies actually relies solely on his eyes? So, in a state of no anomalies, would he be no different from an ordinary person? This may be a very important piece of intelligence. He regained his senses and his face suddenly changed. He saw that Buyu had already walked to the vicinity of the red coffin, looking at the female corpse inside. How could it be that I didn't notice when he left? It's too late to stop now. In addition to being nervous, Lu Zhan has already thought of countermeasures. It's really quite cold, is it really an air conditioner? It's quite realistic. Buyu looked at the female corpse with interest and found that apart from her slightly pale face, everything else was just like a real person. He poked the arm of the female corpse. Hard. I poked my face again. It's still hard. This corpse is hard all over, like cold steel. But it's not surprising, isn't air conditioning just hard? Don't touch it randomly, the short man shouted, gritting his teeth and adding. It's very expensive. Although it was an air conditioner, after all, it was a woman's image, and Buyu naturally wouldn't touch it randomly. He withdrew his hand and expressed emotion on his face. It's unbelievable that it's actually a humanoid air conditioner. It seems that it can't be disconnected from society. As he sighed, a police officer walked up to Lu Zhan and whispered, Marine, is this guy having a brain problem? Shut up. Lu Zhan glanced at him and breathed a faint sigh of relief. It seems that the Tomb Keeper does have a natural talent for self-deception, but it's strange why does this zombie remain motionless? The same doubt also appeared in the short man's heart. He couldn't understand why the zombie that had been with him for so long had to hang up in order to establish a relationship with zombies. He feeds his own blood and dresses them up, just like serving an old man. However, even so, the other party will occasionally lose control and chase after him, biting him until he howls. He had no choice but to use chains to trap the zombies in the coffin. Although he couldn't bear to let zombies come out to fight, as the saying goes, raising soldiers for 1,000 days means using them for a while. Now that I need the other party to fight, she actually hides in the coffin without moving. Isn't this just a show? Oh, forget it. The short man let out a slight sigh and said to himself, if you don't fight, so as not to be damaged by someone else. And just as he was feeling conflicted, he heard the kid suddenly ask, "How should I turn off this air conditioner? I didn't find the switch." Still pretending to be crazy and foolish. The short man originally didn't want to talk to him, but suddenly thought of something and said loudly, "The switch is on her mouth, just press her lips." After a pause, he quickly added, "Remember, just press once." "Humph, you dare to act like a fool to me. Give it a try and even bite off your finger." The short man cruelly thought, and saw that the guy was indeed holding up, and casually reached out his hand to the female corpse's mouth. The police officers remained silent, but the more they looked, the more they felt that Buyu didn't seem like a normal person. In theory, even if a normal person is brave, they should not be afraid of corpses at all, right? But this guy clearly seems to lack a muscle. Lu Zhan also remained motionless, staring intently at Buyu, wanting to verify a hypothesis. Buyu naturally didn't know what everyone was thinking, so he didn't hesitate and lightly pressed the lips of the female corpse. Soft. It seems that the switch is indeed correct, he thought. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. The short stature was even more dumbfounded. 3 seconds had passed and nothing had happened. Why don't zombies bite him? No, after a moment, he was horrified to find that the temperature in the room had actually risen. That is to say the inherent low temperature characteristics of zombies actually disappear with just one press of the mouth. Wake up quickly. You are a cruel weapon, a bloodthirsty zombie, not a real air conditioner. The short man shouted with grief and indignation in his heart, but the female corpse remained indifferent. He looked at it and lowered his head as if accepting his fate. Why do you want to play me? End of this chapter.